Okay.
A lot of people like to read horror stories, right?
Sure.
Novels. I don't know why, but the most horrible stories that I ever read is a nonfiction book by a woman named Alice Miller, who was a Swiss psychologist. And I think the title is For Your Own Good.
Okay.
And she talks about how the World War II generation, the Hitler generation of Germans were raised and schooled. And she gives general idea and philosophy behind how the schools were organized in Germany and when they were growing up. And she traces three famous Germans from that era in their upbringing. And one was Hitler, one was a famous prostitute in the area, and one was a famous criminal in the area. Relating it to their education, which was all done for their own good, which are, to me, the most chilling words that a manager or teacher or parent could ever utter to a child or an adult. You don't know what's good for other people. There might be a little bit of truth in that for children and adults. It might be. And that's assuming that their interest was really in the child's good.
Right.
It's just a cover for, you're going to do this because it's for my own good.
Well, and I feel, since generally we talk about topics, all kinds of stuff, but since we like to talk about topics that involve adults, if you're a manager or a leader is saying this to you, if someone is telling you as a grown-up, as a professional, even just as a grown-up human, that they're doing something for your own good, you are immediately suspicious, it sounds like. You find these to be the most horrifying words people can utter. What does it really mean to you?
Because all they have to do, if they're really interested in my own good, as an adult, if it's me being an adult, is they would simply say, I have a thought of something you might want to do. You might benefit from this. If you think it's beneficial, or it could be beneficial, do you want to hear what it is?
Most people would, okay.
If you're an adult, that's what you would do. And you could respond to that, because then you have, as an adult, you have a choice. Well, I'm not really into self-improvement this week. Maybe come back in a week or so. But generally, when people say that, I don't know, who knows what they're intending. They don't probably know. But I think it's, generally speaking, when managers say this to people, it's to get them to do something for the manager who thinks will be good for the manager.
Right.
But they're a little bit ashamed of that or something.
I hear phrases like, here's what you should do, as a precursor to inflicting help on someone. I think Johanna Rothman's the one that taught me that phrase, inflicting help.
She learned that from me.
Okay.
I learned it from Virginia Satir. Yeah. That's something you don't want to do. It's the same way in a feedback book. Even back when we wrote it, I think we used the concept of giving feedback, giving and receiving. But I've learned since to say offering feedback.
Yeah.
You're offering something. You can't force it on somebody. If you have an axe, you can feedback, blow to their head with the axe, and they can't refuse it. But that's what we're talking about.
But you can't. Okay, so I have a question on that. So it seems like when I've been in situations where my manager has not offered feedback, that is, he has not asked permission to give feedback or to say something. He has just said, I'm going to give you feedback X, Y, Z. I couldn't stop him from doing that, but I certainly could stop myself from applying it or taking it to heart or viewing it in any positive way. So I couldn't stop his mouth from moving, a bit like an axe coming down, but I certainly could stop myself from using it maybe he was trying to be constructive. I don't know.
You can shut your ears off if you can't
Yes.
shut your mouth off. But hey, if you're a manager and you really want to, quote, give feedback to somebody, you could start by saying, look, I'd like to give you some information about something I have observed that you've been doing or not been doing. Is this a good time for us to sit down and do that?
Mm.
Because for nothing else, there are times when you're, like if I'm sitting here, even with this $100 bill that Danny, I'm sitting here and she wants to give me all kinds of information about where she got the $100 and why she's getting it. And I'm here talking to you and we're recording a session.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good time for it. If she wants me to really hear this,
right.
you do while I'm on the phone with somebody else or I'm stuck in I'm writing something and my mind really goes into a trance. It's not a good time. Right? Or my dog is at the vet having a life-threatening operation. I'm not wanting to hear something from the boss about the color of the tie that I'm wearing. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's definitely not going to be received. It's like you want to talk to someone on the phone. The first thing you have to do is get them to answer the phone. I mean, you can talk into your phone all you want, and I don't pick up my phone. It's not going to register. Right?
I like that. I'm going to remember. I can talk into my phone all I want, especially if I'm the one I want to hear talking. But the other person has to accept the call.
I mean, even feedback to yourself. Like if you say, I want to remind myself of something. Like these people who keep trying. Johanna's always telling me I need to keep a to-do list. She's big on that. She's very good with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done that at times. I've tried that. I use software for that and pencil and paper for that. But there's always one thing I forget to do.
Write on the list?
No, I remember to write on the list. I forget to ever look at the list.
Ah. I remember that when I started using to-do lists, the enormous load that it took off my shoulders just to put it on a piece of paper. But then 2 weeks later, nothing was different. I was farther behind because I also didn't really look at the list, but I wrote stuff on the list.
Yeah. Well, so this is like feedback to somebody who's not receiving at the time. Right?
I never thought about a to-do list as feedback to myself.
Yeah, of course, that's what it is, right?
Yeah, it's my list. It's like a journal. It's for me, about me.
Here, Margaret, here's some things that you said you wanted to do that you may have forgotten, and I'm giving you some feedback about it.
Yeah. So you talked about offering feedback, and we talked about the timing, and we talked about the permission, where you gently, is sort of the way you talked about it, you gently ask the person, can I give you this? Is this a good time for you to receive it? Things like that. So if the person agrees that they would like it and they agree that this is a good time,
they still might not accept it, right?
Now, as the manager, they might tell you with their mouth, oh, thank you, I'll go do that, and walk away very upset and never do anything.
Yeah. I mean, like I have, and Danny also, we have a very negative reaction to chocolate. It makes us sick.
Oh, wow.
So every once in a while, someone gives us a gift of chocolate. And what do?
I don't know.
Well, you could say, well, okay, don't give us that. That's kind of rude and unappreciative and so on.
Right.
You could go through an explanation then about why you have to refuse it, or you could take it and eat it just to be nice and then get sick for them, right? Or you could take it and just not say anything and not do anything with it. Maybe we'll give it to somebody else.
Give it to someone else, yeah.
Don't give it to the dogs either.
No,
Right?
no.
So that's what happened. Those are the same kinds of choices you have when someone offers you feedback gift, right? You could just tell them right away, no, I don't want to hear that, or don't tell me that. Or you could explain to them, well, that was an interesting idea that I should wear red ties, but I don't wear ties, whatever. You can go into a long thing, which usually is a waste of time, because now you're giving feedback to them.
Back to them.
You might do the same thing. Or you can actually try to do it and go out and buy some red ties and choke yourself with them, which isn't such a great thing. Or you can just say, well, thank you for offering that. And just then forget about it, or make your decision whether you'll do it or not. But I always like to thank people, assuming their intention is good.
Mm-hmm.
One way to deal with a manager who's giving you some feedback with the finger extended, in fact, I think, wait a second. I have an artifact here, if I can find it. I give them away all the time, so I may not have one anymore. Well, I guess I gave that away too. Well, I don't know. I usually buy finger puppets, and you can imagine.
Like they go on your index finger?
Like this is a little puppy or something.
Okay.
This is different. So when somebody is doing this to me, can you see my?
Yes.
I'll stick my finger puppet on their finger.
On their finger? You'll just take and put it on their finger?
And then suddenly they're waving a puppy at me while they're giving me feedback. I do that with a lot of my students when they show that characteristic. I mean, if you want to be sure that people won't listen to what you're offering, you stick this in their face.
That's right. So if you're seeing this on video, this is a reminder, no one likes it. It's uncomfortable to look at.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an attack. It's clearly an attack. Right?
Yeah. I know in the past we've talked about, like, as almost a thought exercise, how to design the worst possible meeting or this and that. And really you're talking like, if you want to be sure people don't accept what you have to say, they don't listen to your feedback, they don't take it to heart, you can do that simply by putting your finger in their face and pointing.
I mean, there are other ways to do it.
Oh, there are.
You know what Steve Ballmer tried to do with me in a meeting. We're all sitting and he wanted to tell me something in addition to his finger. He stood up and hovered over me where I was sitting, which of course really helps.
I bet it did. That clearly changed your mind, right?
Yeah, it did. I changed my mind about sitting down. I stood up.
You stood up.
And I'm a little taller than he is, so it was.
I don't have that advantage of being taller than almost anyone else, but that's okay.
I have some feedback for you. You should grow taller.
I will. I can. Your finger, I can't quite see it, but I know it's there.
You grow taller. By the next time we get together, I want you to be 4 inches taller.
I feel like that is about the same tone as which I'd been told. You just need to work smarter, not harder, or faster, or apply yourself, or live up to your potential. Dedicated. You're just not putting.
Player.
I'm not putting in the. That's right. Everyone else is doing their part. You're falling behind, whatever it is. Oh, I have, I think some PTSD from fourth grade teachers is coming back or something.
Well, I mean, people, when I object to these things, people think I'm making a moral objection, and I'm not. I'm just trying to point out to them that it doesn't work. And you can ask them, does it work on you when someone does that to you? And almost everybody will think about it. Their eyes roll back, and they think about their fourth grade teacher or whatever it was. And oh, well, no, I don't like it. Then why do you do it to other people? I mean, you don't have to be a devout Christian to know that
Do unto
do
others.
unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Right. That's a pretty darn good saying. And it's so funny because we have the physical finger. We could stand up and make ourselves bigger and intimidating. We can raise our voice. Sometimes we can lean across the desk and look intimidating. There's many ways to make sure that our feedback isn't heard.
Use the setting.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Did I ever tell you? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Did I ever tell you the story that the first time I ever got promoted into management, it was a very auspicious affair. My boss burst into the restroom and I was in the big stall and he yelled, "Marcus, you got promoted. See me when you're done."
Well, it's better than the example I was going to give. As you're passing in the hall,
Right.
and just as you're walking by, it tells you you've been promoted or you've been demoted or
Yeah.
getting a raise or you're lowering your, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I had, I guess it didn't really matter in a way, but I remember one example. I was working with a manager. He had a problem employee and he had me to help him. We're sitting in the manager's office and he's starting to tell this employee why he's on probation and he's very close to being fired. And his phone rings and the manager picks up the phone and talks for 15 or 20 minutes to somebody on the phone.
Oh.
You know.
Oh. That actually makes me a little nauseous.
And he had no idea what he was doing. I mean,
I remember early in my career, I had actually a pretty good manager, and this was my title. It was junior programmer. I don't think they give this title out anymore because they feel it's a little humiliating, but that was my title, junior programmer, because I hadn't gotten my bachelor's degree, so I had to start there.
Assistant junior programmer.
I was a junior, yeah, and I was in my boss's office talking about a project, and his phone rings, and it had like an LED screen, and I could see it was the name of his boss. And I immediately said, "Oh, I'll let you take that." I started to get up, and he didn't even look at the phone. He just reached back and he picked it up and he put it right back down. I said, "No, we're having a conversation. I'm sure they'll leave a message." I still remember that to this day.
Well, I guess we should give some. Andy, we're recording this, so it would be nice if you could close the door, maybe. I mean, a little dog barking is nice, but then I think we should give some examples of good feedback, good interactions between managers, employees, or whatever. And I'm remembering when you started to tell that story, I remember Dave Beeman, who was my manager many years ago in Los Angeles. And I went on a trip. I wasn't a very experienced traveler yet. So I went to a trip to see, I think it was Motorola in Phoenix. And I had a meeting, a lunch meeting with a bunch. We were trying to sell them a computer. And we had lunch and I paid for the lunch. And there's about 10 of them, something like that. And next week I turned in my expense account thing, and Dave called me in his office and we sat down and he said, "Look, I'm looking over your expense account and I'm not questioning, anything on here, but I'm curious." He says, "I've been to Phoenix a number of times and I have some really good restaurants I go to there. But I'm wondering where you went where you could spend this much on one lunch." Well, I have recorded it I hadn't pointed out that there were 11 of us there.
Right.
You know, and then I was taking the customer to lunch. I didn't know how to do that on the expense account. So instead of, you know, jumping in and accusing me, but no, you can't spend that much money for lunch or whatever. He just told me, he was smiling, and I got it. I was embarrassed, but it was very easy to get over. I just didn't know how to. He said, well, here's how you record that.
I like that he approached it with at least a principle of curiosity. For some reason, that really resonated with me. I'm curious how, I've been to a lot of lunches. How did you spend $500 on lunch or whatever amount of money it was?
Can't remember the amount now. It was a long time ago. So inflation has probably made it seem like not a very expensive lunch. But he wanted to know the restaurant. So this must be quite a place.
That's a really good example of giving you feedback. There wasn't any humiliation. There was a little embarrassment, maybe some laughter along with it, right? And
you see what it was doing. I didn't understand that at the time, but now I teach that from Virginia Satir's model of interactions. There's the data that you take in, which in this case was that I had put $500 down for lunch. And then there's the interpretation you make of the data, which is different. He could have accused me of trying to cheat the company out of $500 by blowing up my expense account. You know, I mean, that's an interpretation. If you see somebody says they spent $500 for lunch, there's a number of interpretations you make. Maybe it was $5 and I forgot the decimal point.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, so managers or anybody, you're in interactions and you don't separate between data and interpretation, you get into trouble. So you start out, like if you've got an employee who's done something you think is bad or wrong or stupid, something, you start out saying, if you're going to offer feedback, it says, here's what I observed. Is that what happened?
So that's the data. And then at first I guess, would you call that checking your facts? This 500, that was $500? What kind of, so he was confirming that really was 500.
Then he said, my interpretation is that it looks like a lot of money for lunch. Is that really what it was? I mean, maybe I had to buy a suit to wear for lunch.
Right.
You know, I mean, who knows what it is? It could be any, but so how should I interpret that? And then the third step is significance. In other words, okay, so if he calls me and says, look, I see you spent $5 for lunch. What are you trying to do? You know, you're trying to cheat us, and we don't have employees who cheat. And I'm thinking $5, you know, is that important?
Right.
Right. See, but if you so it could be a lot of things and if it's not going to be important, once you know what the interpretation is, that's it. Then you drop it.
You and I were talking about this last week, and we were talking, I mean, you gave the example, I think, of the person who wanted his report to the penny, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And you handed a $5 bill. And so we start with data, then we go to interpretation, but we have to move to significance. If it is really not significant, if it's a penny off, right? If it is, where did you spend $10 for lunch or $11 or whatever it is? If it really is not significant, you really have to drop it at that point. And I think so many people, so many managers feel like they need to say something, this probably isn't going to sound right, but almost on principle. The principle of the dollar. But that really gets in the way of the actuality of how minor it was.
This is like, I am the boss. I am the guardian of the morals of the universe.
That's right. If I don't do it, who will?
Yeah, but in the example that I gave last week, see, there we got into trouble was there was no question about the data. It was off by a penny, the cross-footing. The interpretation was different. The two of us. My interpretation is that because rounding, it's a mathematical artifact. You can't always guarantee it if you do that cross-footing, it's going to work. His interpretation was that your computer must be doing something wrong.
Was there also his interpretation that you must have done something wrong as you're the operator?
The program.
Right.
And of course, it was in the early days of computers, and maybe a lot of nowadays people interpret it the other way. You know, the computer must be right and I must be wrong.
Yeah, the programmer is wrong.
No, just, you know, my numbers must be wrong or something.
Oh, sure.
I did something wrong, but that's equally off base. But the point is, his interpretation and mine were different, and that led us each to a different significance. To him, he said, if this thing is calculated incorrectly, I've got to guard the state's money. I mean, this could be millions of dollars. In my case, it was my ego. I did a good job. I did this thing perfectly, and you're challenging my credibility, my knowledge, my wisdom, my intelligence, my craft, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a personal affront to me, and so we get into this clash, right?
And so were you able to, but then could you, I know that you told the story about.
So what I did when I give him this $5 was basically saying, I'm not a fool, you're a fool.
Right.
See?
And you did mention that maybe you wouldn't do that today.
I wouldn't do that today because now I understand the interaction. And he's saying I've made a mistake. And no, I didn't make a mistake. It's a mathematical thing. I try a little bit to explain it to him. If he doesn't get it, it's not worth it. It's a penny. I can fix it by jiggering the program a little bit, which is what I did anyway, ultimately. And he'd never know that because he's not capable of understanding what's going on.
Right. As I recall.
And it's not important.
You introduced an error which resulted in all the cross-footings, right?
Yeah.
But mathematically, it was an error. It was, but
I didn't actually cross-foot the thing.
Yeah. I think that so many, especially technical leaders who've done, technical managers who used to do the work and now oversee the work in some way or guide or whatever word you want to use, manage is the most popular one. Oftentimes we'll be looking at some result of someone's work and they will jump to I think that the data and the interpretation are in one soup that has been thoroughly mixed for them. So this idea of separating them, and of course, I know it's a very loaded question, but it seems like we're not looking for the right interpretation. Do we start by identifying our own interpretation to understand what's happening?
Yeah, I think well, it would be nice if everybody involved could come to the same interpretation and it was the right interpretation, because often it comes to the same interpretation, but it's wrong.
So we might all agree to interpret it a certain way, but it's not truthful. It's not the right interpretation.
Yeah, I've done that many times when a program is behaving strangely. And we all agree it must be because so-and-so is happening inside. Mm-hmm. It isn't. Mm-hmm. Else, right? Better or worse, we don't. So, or I'll be buying something in the store and this clerk is offering me I would buy a pair of socks. I want for outdoor hiking or something. And the clerk is showing me these socks that I don't want.
Oh.
I don't want them. But I'm interpreting that the clerk is trying to be helpful. Mm-hmm. The clerk is trying to be helpful. but they're the wrong socks for what I want.
So someone else can be very helpful, but that doesn't mean you want those socks.
Yeah, and they don't understand my problem.
Right. Sometimes we can interpret the clerk as not being helpful. They're trying to sell us exactly the socks we need, but we perceive and interpret them to be pushy or trying to make a sale or something else. Yeah. That might even get in the way of us getting the right socks.
Right. So you can go wrong in an interaction at any one of these levels. You can have different data. I thought you said this, but you said something else. I didn't hear it. Right? Or I heard what you said, but I interpreted it to mean something different from what you intended. Or
how does anyone communicate ever?
Well, it's impossible, really. But and we find that out, when we program computers.
Yes, we do.
Because they mirror back to us. And they interpret literally whatever we tell them. And but that isn't what I meant. Okay. See, the computer doesn't go through, hopefully, this interaction sequence. In other words, you enter some data or command and to do this, and the computer does it. If it can't do it, then it may have to give you an error message, or it may just hide the fact that it's not doing it, which is terrible. And I added, I think, a chapter to my book on errors, about error messages. See, one of the things that goes wrong is you write an error message that looks like it's interpreting what you've done. And then you start getting into trouble.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I'll give you an example that goes even a step further. And it goes to like the significance of it.
Okay.
This one that I always remember, Danny was learning to program an APL. All right? And an APL is do a lot of work with arrays. Arrays, an array has a rank, right? A rank. It's multi-dimensional, it has different numbers. And she did something wrong, and she got an error, and it said, rank error. And she interpreted that rank not in a mathematical sense, but in the sense that if you have a piece of meat and it's left out, it gets rank.
It's like stinks really bad. Yeah.
It's a stinky error. And she got so upset with that. Right? Well, that wasn't the intention in that case. It was really a mathematical statement. But other statements like, you've entered the wrong data type.
Mm-hmm.
You start with blaming sounding things.
True.
Or why did you enter this number? Any statement, these statements that start with why questions are pretty blaming to begin with.
Yeah. And pretty lousy from an error message perspective.
Well, right, but the person is just trying to be helpful. Their intention is to get you to think about why you entered this number, and then, but that isn't the way it comes across to most people most of the time, because they've heard that since they were this big. Why did you do this?
Oh, now you're bringing up a whole other topic. What were you thinking was the very common phrase around my childhood home.
Or were you thinking when you did that?
It was always, what were you thinking, followed, and then I would get interrupted and told, well, you weren't, were you? It seemed to be something that someone in my family would enjoy. Now, how do you feel about error messages that simply say, error code 7?
Oh, well, there's a whole bunch of stories there. I remember at the university, all of our students worked at local industry. And one of them came to me, we had a help desk, came to me and they had this thing and it said error code. And it's an impossible error. This error cannot occur. So it was kind of puzzled by that. And he said, what does this mean? And I looked at it and I said, well, look further. And it says, if you get this message, see your IBM representative. And I said, well, that's clear. He says, but I am my IBM representative.
Now computers, I seem to recall this. It just came back to me, so maybe I'm not remembering it right. I seem to remember in college, we were on like a Sun Microsystems or a Sequence, some 16-bit Unix system. And I remember the systems administrator had a book of error codes, quite thick. And he would, am I thinking right that you would ship these with the computer? You would look up the error?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The huge error manual.
Yeah. And so probably the key was just making sure all the error codes were unique, because you just had to be able to find it in the book.
Well, a lot of unique is interesting.
Oh.
You get a lot of errors. They would bring many errors together with the same code.
That's it. So you would turn to the code and you would find 5 different problems it could be?
Yeah. Or you'd see one, but it was actually 5 different things that led to that, because the programmer didn't want to bother creating another error code.
Ah.
Or they'd be another example that I'll never forget. I wish I had a video of this. When I was in Geneva, and I had, as a group, the team from England, IBM, who had written the compiler for the first PL1 compiler. They were taking my course, and I was teaching them to program in PL1, because they were assembly language programmers. They didn't actually know the language.
But they had written the compiler for PL1.
They'd written the compiler for it, which is already starting to be a problem, right?
Right. In assembly language, though.
Yeah, in assembly language. So we had a little shop where we did batch computing then, and everybody gets their printout. They're sitting there trying to figure out what the error messages mean and so on, and I'm in there to help them. And this one guy, Neville, starts cursing. He's looking through his listening and he's cursing. What's the matter, Neville? And he says, listen, look at this error message. He says, one of the subscripts in one of the arrays, in one of the dimensions of one of the arrays, is out of bounds.
But we won't tell you which one.
So we don't tell you which array it is. We won't tell you which subscript it is. We won't tell you whether it's too big or too small.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, how can I do this? Jesus. And the other guy, I forget the other guy's name, says, Neville, you wrote that code.
That's right. And now he's only upset. Was he stunned that he had written that code?
Yeah, he just went speechless for a period, and, because he was on the other side.
Right.
To be on the receiving end of your own feedback, which is what it was, right? But you wouldn't like it when stuff comes to you. So that's one way to cure people, maybe. I'm not sure you can easily cure this. When somebody says to you, what were you thinking? What were you thinking when you did that in the code? And then you say back to me, well, what were you thinking when you asked me, what were you thinking? With the finger out, too. Right?
Oh, with the finger out. Maybe I should stand while I say it.
Good. Just mimic their whole posture and everything else. And maybe, again, I've done that sometimes, and sometimes they, oh, yeah, okay, sorry.
Mm.
They don't know what's coming out of their mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. It is hard to, I mean, I think it's hard to write error messages. We live in a day and age where every website tries to be as friendly.
No, it's not hard to write error messages. It's easy. That guy I'm talking about, it was very easy for him to write that error message. He didn't have to put in there what array it was. He didn't have to put in some script it was. It was the easiest possible. He says, you just made a dumb mistake. That's the error message.
It's funny. His local, I guess.
Useful error message. Now, that's a whole other question.
Useful error messages. So what are I realize this is a part of feedback. Maybe we can figure out how to talk about this with human beings, but what are attributes of actually useful for error messages from computers? Do you have a favorite error message?
Well, I have some favorite bad ones.
Well, I was looking for the opposite, but whatever.
I was up in northern Norway, way up north near the Arctic Circle, teaching a class and in something. And one of the breaks, one of the guys came up to me and said, look, this isn't the subject of the class, but we've been trying to use this program that we got from the US and sort of shareware of some kind. And we get this error message. The program goes in and puts out a message, and all it says is snafu. We looked in our dictionary and we can't find this word, and we don't, what does it mean? So I told him, that is an acronym. Oh, it's not very helpful.
That's
well, all right. So that goes to your original question. So a helpful message ought to be in the customer's own language.
Okay.
If he's Norwegian, it ought to be in Norwegian. I mean,
that's true.
So even though they all knew English very well, but they didn't know slang English. I think nowadays with the internet, you could probably find snafu very easily. And all of them, then you say, oh, in other words, we're not going to help you. That's what it's
right.
Right. Okay, so it's got to be in their language, not just English or Norwegian, but not in special jargon of the computer trade. If they're not computer people, it's one thing. If it's a computing tool, you might use something. But we have a tendency to put out stuff that is of no meaning. So that's another part of it, right? What language it should be in. And this applies to all feedback. I mean, it ought to be talk about things that people understand, have a chance of understanding. And but in error messages, be specific where you can be, right? I just saw a number on my screen. I thought, what is that? It wasn't the number I thought it was. It should be readable. So when you see it, don't misinterpret what it says. And it should point specifically to what happened, not be blaming. To say, this is what happened. I got the computer said, I got a string of characters and I thought I should get a number. I don't know what to do with it. Huh?
Sure, you get an ABC and a phone number. You should probably let them know as quickly, I don't know if as quickly as possible, but as clearly as possible that you need something that, do you like examples in error messages? Examples of what the system is looking for?
Well, and certainly actions, where you can go next. Not see your IBM representative when you are the IBM representative.
Right.
Where can I go for further assistance in this is very, very important. If it directs you correctly, right? Now, one example I got when I posted this, a guy he had made an error message in a program, and it had instructions that if you can't figure out what's going on, come and see me. It is local phone, was internal to a company. And that was fine, except as time went by, it was considered an exemplary error message. So lots of other programmers copied it, including to go see this guy when they had and he started getting these people coming to him with errors and programs he'd never seen, right? So that wouldn't be so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to direct them somewhere, but it should be somewhere that they can actually get help.
My least favorite is when I'm filling out a long, say, a checkout form on a website. I'm trying to purchase something and there's 10 fields I have to fill out. And I scroll and I fill it out and I scroll. I get to the bottom and I hit submit or buy or whatever. And the page just sits there. And I don't know what's happened. So sometimes I hit it again. And then I'll finally find, if I scroll up at the very top, there's something that says, phone number is in the incorrect format, or
yeah, and then the whole thing is blanked out, so you have to enter it all again. That happened to me this morning already.
Oh golly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times we've played that. I've played the game, which is almost like one of these things is not like the other, or like an Easter egg hunt where you're looking at every field going, do they all, yeah, that looks right. And you hit it again. And then, yes, sometimes I just leave. Well, sometimes I leave the house, but more often I just leave whatever I'm trying to do and I give up.
Mm-hmm. And you give up using a particular application altogether.
Mm-hmm.